providing resources to this industry. I say it all the time, that this industry is going to move forward. It's going to take the best and the brightest from all the other industries, bringing those services to bear, those skills, those resources, those abilities to bear on the industry. And the panel behind us,
so many questions about how you're doing things. I'm glad to have someone to compare notes with.
That have helped us build what we are. And so and businesses are people too. It really is what we are as an organization. You know, these are the people that I think are, and to a large extent currently are, the future of the industry. So I'm going to turn it over to our host and moderator, also the president of our Broward chapter. Quick plug if you are a member. Great idea to get involved. But Amanda Barsky heads up our Broward chapter, also a local attorney, and again, one of the great people and ancillary businesses that help cannabis. So thanks, Amanda.
Great. Thank you, everybody. As Rob said, my name is Amanda Barton. I'm a senior associate at the Law for All. We're a boutique firm in Broward County that offers all sorts of businesses for entrepreneurs. All sorts of services for entrepreneurs. We help draft operating agreements, help with administrative matters, advise on compliance and other matters similar. So we have an amazing panel for you today. As Rob mentioned, the title of our panel is Picks and Shovels, Ancillary Businesses Are Cannabis Companies Too. So back in the gold rush days, some of the most lucrative people who partook was those that were selling the picks and the shovels to those who were going to look for gold. So just because you were going to look for gold doesn't mean you weren't going to get it, but those people that took that opportunity and sold those picks and shovels really helped not only facilitate that industry, but were some of the most successful. We have a great panel, as I mentioned today, so I'll go and give a brief introduction. You guys can introduce yourself. First, we have David Braun. He's with S2S Insurance. He's vice president of Braun & Associates as well. S2S Insurance is a company that provides specialty insurance for those in the cannabis and hemp industry. So his clients are, so his clients are those cannabis and hemp clients within the industry. So you want to tell us a little bit more about you, Dave?
Yeah, hi, my name's Dave Ron. I'm the VP of Account Services for S2S Insurance at Braun & Associates Insurance. We deal primarily with cannabis insurance products anywhere in the supply chain cycle. So once that seed goes into the ground to once that transaction happens over the counter, we can have you covered from an insurance perspective. I also deal in traditional markets as well, so plant touching and non-plant touching coverages. I can offer both, as well as some alternative risk strategies, such as parametric insurance technology for outdoor crop, and also captive insurance for if you want to put your risk as a line item on your balance sheet instead of having it as a liability.
Very interesting. Dave has been a member of our board, our leadership board, for years, so he's a familiar face. Thank you so much for being here today. We really appreciate it.
Sorry for being late.
The rain is a little crazy. Next we have Zach Kobrin. He's with Akerman. Before joining Akerman, specifically their government affairs and public policy group, he worked as general counsel and chief compliance officer for a multinational cannabis company. He's also been active with the Florida-grown case that's in front of the Supreme Court. Akerman is actively representing one of the parties in that matter. Zach, can you tell us a little bit more about yourself?
Sure, thank you. I've been working as an attorney in the cannabis space since 2015, 2016, when Florida was just getting off the ground. Currently, I work with companies from all spectrums, so plant touching operators to a lot of ancillary businesses that do provide the goods and services that cannabis operators need all over the country, not just in Florida. As Amanda said previously, I was general counsel to an operator here in Florida, and so I'm fortunate enough to work with a lot of great people in and out of the industry, and you know, it's afforded me the ability to sit on panels like this, so I'm excited to have a conversation today.
Thank you for joining us. Zach is another active member of our leadership. Thank you for being here. He's always supported Cannabis Labs, so big shout out to Akerman and Zach and their whole team. Next is Douglas Fisher. He's general counsel for Green Lane. Green Lane is a U.S. publicly traded company. They provide a lot of both manufacturing and distribution of what we consider paraphernalia for the industry. So whether it be smoking devices or rolling papers or lighters, or he works with a lot of distributors throughout the nation. So thank you for being here, Doug. Do you want to tell us a little bit more about yourself and your involvement in the cannabis industry?
Sure, thank you. So, as Amanda said, my name is Doug Fisher. I'm the general counsel of Green Lane Holdings. We're a global seller of cannabis accessories and lifestyle products. We operate in a few spaces. We're a distributor both as a wholesaler and a retailer of some of the biggest brands of cannabis accessories, packs, G-Pen, Storz & Bickel. As well, we manufacture several of our house brands, Vibes rolling papers, the Marley Natural line of accessories. We operate in the United States, Europe. We have an operation out of the Netherlands and Canada as well. We also have a line of our business that services licensed cannabis companies with vaporization hardware, pre-roll cones, packaging, and the like. As Amanda mentioned, we're publicly traded on the NASDAQ. We were the first ancillary business to do an IPO on a major U.S. exchange.
Wow. Well, thank you for being here. Next, we have Dana Chavez, who's Senior Vice President with First Federal Bank. She's the Director of Specialty Banking Services. And before she joined First Federal, she's been in the cannabis industry for a long time, also in Colorado, before joining First Federal Bank here in Florida. So she brings a lot of expertise when it comes to banking. Tell us a little about yourself, Dana.
I got my banking career started in cannabis a little over 7 years ago in Colorado, and came to First Federal 2 years ago to help build their cannabis banking program. We are a federally chartered mutual bank, so we can bank in all 50 states. We have successfully opened over 600 accounts for plant touching, non-plant touching, ancillary businesses nationwide, and we are in the process of developing additional products and services that are not readily available to business in this industry, and we're looking forward to growing with the community here. Thank you.
Thank you. And last but not least, we have Liz Figueroa. She's a senior tax professional with Daskal Bolton. She has been doing tax for quite a while in the cannabis space. Yeah. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Liz.
So our firm got into the industry back in 2016. And so our firm is very entrepreneurial. So when we saw that this industry was going to come to Florida, we wanted to really kind of be like in the front and really start taking charge. So we started to educate ourselves, and then we started building momentum with some of the license holders, getting applications and the application process. So we do tax, audits, valuations, transaction advisory, just business consulting in general. So we do a bunch of things. So we're here today, and I'm happy to be here.
Yes, thank you for being here. So my first question is, some of your companies originally did not start by offering services to the cannabis industry. Like you Liz, you were a tax professional, not necessarily when your company started doing cannabis or servicing cannabis and hemp clients. How did your company open its arms to this? Was it something that you had an internal fight about? How did your company decide to start offering services? Because there's a lot of liability, a lot of compliance matters to consider. Yeah. How did you guys come to the decision to start venturing into the cannabis space?
So I'm really thankful to have a firm where our firm is very entrepreneurial. So when we see something, if we see a client who's very entrepreneurial, we want to go after them. A lot of our clients are entrepreneurs, so we built our client base with that mentality already. So when I saw that this industry was going to come up in Florida, I was like, I think that I could get the firm to be supportive of it. So I spoke to a friend that was an attorney, a business attorney, and so I asked him for his feedback, and he says, well, it'll be great, just make sure that obviously you have all your I's dotted and your T's crossed. And so I reached out to, I started reaching out internally to some of the partners and thinking like, let's have a conversation about it. And they were receptive, they were very supportive. And then so we talked to our insurance liability, professional insurance liability that will cover us, and just make sure that if anything ever happens that they'll cover us. And so this was never kind of an industry that our firm was built off of. A lot of our clientele was always originally manufacturing, real estate, any clients in South Florida. And essentially, we were like, I think that we could grow the firm with this industry as well. But there was a lot of a lot of internal things that we had to do before, really tackling the industry.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
especially being a tax professional, dealing with the tax returns, there's a lot of liability that could be associated with offering those types of services.
Yeah,
so
especially if we have an audit department too. So when we're auditing our financials for clients, we have investors who rely on these financials. If there's anything that ever happens with these financials, they could always come after us for anything. So there's always risk in any sort of way. Yeah.
How about you, Dana? Was First Federal Bank, were they receptive? Did they bring you in for the purposes of starting the cannabis, working with the cannabis groups, the cannabis clients?
The board of directors and the senior management had made the decision to enter the industry before I came on board. They brought me on to help manage that and to make sure everything was within compliance and we were doing everything properly. They saw the need to help serve. It's a matter of safety and the ability to provide services not readily available to this industry to help them be successful businesses. And so I think that we've been very successful working with our customers and helping them grow and expand.
Wonderful. We'll pivot a little bit. Obviously, it's always a big decision if you're transitioning into the cannabis and hemp space as an ancillary service provider. But Zach, I have a question for you. As a lawyer, from a legal and compliance perspective, what are some of the extra steps that you take when you're working with a cannabis or a hemp client versus a a traditional client?
I mean, that's a good point. It's one of the things that what I would used to tell people, what I would normally tell people is, imagine, we all know what a CYA is, right? You take the extra steps to cover your back. Multiply that by 3 or 4. And that's what life is like operating in a highly regulated industry. Cannabis, for anyone that understands legal parlance, is nothing more than a widget. It's just a very highly regulated widget. So that means that you have to approach it. You approach transactions the same way you would. You approach regulatory matters the same way you would, except you are injecting an extra layer of regulatory intervention because you have to comply with the guidelines that are laid out within either federal or state regulations. So one of the things that, as lawyers, that we need to be mindful of is, especially in the cannabis sector, where we are dealing with not like one large federal bucket of legislation and regulation, but a bunch of small siloed buckets. So, we have clients that operate in Florida, California, Illinois, Michigan, multiple states. So you have to be able to explain and provide guidance to clients and operators how, hey, listen, this is how we are going to operate, but we're going to craft it a little bit different in each market. That way you can't run afoul of what, say, the regulators in Michigan or the regulators in Florida want. It requires good bedside manner, a good, well, it sounds crazy, a soft touch.
Right.
Because a lot of times companies come in, they're startups, they want to grow as fast as they can, they want to stick to their principles, they want to stick to their beliefs, but you have to make them understand, hey, listen, you can do this, but here are your options. When I started practicing in this space, one of the things that one of the first lessons I learned was, and this is almost contrary to what lawyers do, because lawyers by their nature are devil's advocates. And one of the first lessons I learned was, don't always think of the answer being no, but think of the answer being, if you can't do X, what's the closest you can get to it? Don't give a client the answer being, no, you can't do that, but give a client the answer being, no, you can't do that, but here are your options to get close to what you want to do. As a lawyer in this space, one of the things I've also really, I think is important to be mindful of is that you want your client to be able to do what they do, right? You don't ever want, as an operator, you don't ever want them to think, well, what are my legal options? How do I craft a contract? You don't need them to do that. Their job is to run the business to the best of their ability, and they're hiring you to, as a lawyer, to provide them the best legal services that help their business. So to the extent that you don't have to change their business model or their principle and allow them to do what they do best, I've always found that's the best option for clients. You know, is it hard? Yeah, because the legal profession is an old, traditional profession. There are, as in many industries, people are set in their ways. So you're not just also convincing business people that want to do one thing how to do something different, but you're also convincing old guard lawyers, hey, we're going to do things a little bit differently. And at the end of the day, it's going to increase our client base, it's going to increase our revenue share, and we're going to provide better services. So I mean, that's the approach I've always taken to it.
Absolutely. And that's great because no client wants to hear no. They never want to hear no. So you got to come with solutions, not problems. For you, Dave, I know you guys have your traditional Ron and Associates, and then you started S2S Insurance. How do you treat cannabis clients and hemp clients differently for insurance purposes? Like, I know that they don't necessarily go with the same carriers. Like, what are some of the complications that you've run into trying to find insurance solutions?
Yeah, so there are a lot of different, hurdles and complications that do come out whether you are trying to pose yourself as a plant touching company or a non-plant touching company. That's one of the things that you need to focus on first. The second thing you need to focus on is, are you just CBD, or are you CBD and THC, or are you CBD, THC, and hemp? Because there also are industrial hemp products that are being sold that still need to be covered by insurance. So once you get that part of the way out and you have your business plan and you have your licensure, you then need to find a knowledgeable broker who knows which carriers are A, going to cover the risk, and B, going to cover the risk and pay out in case there ever is a claim or there is something that does trigger the claims process. You need to have a competent, highly rated carrier or a surplus carrier that has strong financial backing so that your claims are paid out in any given point in time.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And you do all that vetting for your clients, so
yeah, I do a lot
can rest assured when they come to you,
yeah,
you got their back.
Both a gatekeeper and a handholder for the carrier and the client.
Right. Well, thank you. Well, Doug, you're the only one representing a ancillary business that provides goods on the panel today, so welcome and thank you. Describe some of the legal hurdles that you experience as in-house counsel for an ancillary company that offers cannabis accessories.
Yeah, there's a lot. It's weird in that our business is not, lots of parts of our business are not directly regulated as a cannabis company, right? We don't require to operate a state cannabis license in any of the states we operate in. But those regimes are relevant to us. They're certainly relevant to our customers. And there are other regimes that's relevant to us. So I kind of break everything into what I'll call two buckets. One is true legal compliance. And that's say we distribute CBD products. There's a whole legal regime or multiple legal regimes we have to comply with, right? We have to know the hemp was grown compliantly. We have to understand what's in the final product and have the certificates of analysis. We can only sell it in states where it's legal. The packaging has to be legal in each of the states we sell it in. That's true legal compliance. There's a set of rules and regulations. And then the other side is what I'll call risk management, but it's relevant and it's going to be relevant to getting a bank account with Dana or anyone else, which is what are the other risks that lurk out there, right? So you could think in the vaporizer space, for example, lots of risks. One, there's safety concerns about them, right? You have to know your supply chain. There's a lot of work that has to be done in ensuring the products are meeting certain testing standards, even though there may not be a law that says you have to do this. It's still a huge risk. Or another example with the vape is, hey, not that long ago we had vape crisis or several cases of acute lung injury. And what was mostly causing that was sales in the illicit market with additives that weren't permissible. Well, where are they getting that hardware from? So we make a decision, in Green Lane, hey, we're only going to sell empty vaporizer hardware to licensed companies whose products are subject to lab testing. There's no law that says that, but one, as a matter of being a good corporate citizen, and two, as a matter of risk management purely for our company, we're not going to sell to anyone who isn't licensed. And so what I would say the biggest challenge is there's this sort of ad hoc approach with every product you sell and every customer type And it all rolls up because, you know, on the one hand, we've got our compliance process, but on the other hand, we're being judged by the stock exchange, by investors, by banks, by insurance companies, and they look at us and say, well, there's not a set of cannabis laws you have to follow. How do I know your business is compliant? I have to be able to break down those two buckets, the legal compliance and the risk, and have a really detailed and thorough explanation as to how we're managing each of those things. So we sort of, in the compliance sense, get the worst of both worlds.
You do. And how do you even keep on top of that? Because you guys, you're not only a national company, but you service worldwide, do you not?
Yeah.
How do you even keep on top of all that? I mean, besides an amazing legal team and having a great general counsel.
It's a lot of work. And there's a lot of, I mean, the nuts and bolts of it are you have a network of advisors who you trust to keep you up to speed. And you have systems internally so that you're alerted to all the changes, and you've got a fluid communication internally, because while, you know, adapting to new regulation begins with the legal team or the compliance team, it certainly doesn't end there. And one of the big things is having fluid communication. So when we say, okay, suddenly this product is now banned in this state or allowed in this state, well, that flows through to IT, who says, okay, now we have to put controls so that salespeople can't put in an order to send it to that state, and operations, so that there's someone on the line picking and packing the boxes who can realize somehow this got through, right?
Yeah.
And so I'd say it's, you know, vigilance, good advisors, and teamwork internally.
Absolutely. Dana, for you, dealing with banking is always a hot topic here in our industry. How is your services a little bit more difficult, or are they difficult when you're banking a cannabis client?
You know, for the purposes of tier 1 or plant touching businesses, you know, there's always a challenge banking them, but actually they're easier than the ancillary businesses.
Really? Why so?
Because we need to know who their customers are and who's paying them and where they're getting that money from. And so we have to follow the dollar all the way down to
downstream
to the natural, you know, where it came from. And so when people say, oh, but we're an ancillary business, we don't even touch the plant, or we're CBD or we're hemp and it's federally legal, why do we have to jump through all these hoops and pay all these expenses? Well, just for those reasons. We're in this space to stay in this space, and we don't want to risk our program by cutting corners or not paying attention or not following full compliance. And so we do pay attention to ownership, funds. We treat every dollar or every penny as though we're a cartel penny. And so it takes a lot of internal resources to manage and monitor the compliance for each and every customer, because we do pay attention to every dollar in and every dollar out. Where did it come from and where does it go? And it's cumbersome, and a lot of, you know, businesses don't understand what we have to do in order to protect them.
I was about to say that they don't probably realize that you're protecting them. They don't want to pay extra fees. They don't want you digging into following the money trail, but you're really providing a service to them by making sure that they're compliant.
Right.
Hopefully
well,
they
because
realize that.
our banking program as a whole is in jeopardy if we make a mistake. So grandma's nest egg and savings account, if we do something wrong and she's not even nowhere near the cannabis space, just because she's an account holder at our bank, we could have all of our assets frozen. And that means her, you know, general accounts as well.
Do you see your non-cannabis clients giving pushback for you offering services to the cannabis industry? Do you know if, like, you've had, you know, non-cannabis companies object to you guys offering banking services for that exact reason, for the liability or potentially getting in trouble?
No,
They've
nobody's
cool?
objected. They just, you know, they don't agree with the fees or the compliance or the due diligence process, and they're free to go somewhere else, but, you know, typically
there's not many.
There isn't many, and I always say if they're not collecting an abundance of information from you and they're not asking for certain things and they're not doing certain things, just be careful, because they might not be in the industry to last.
Right, definitely. And any of you in the audience that are interested in starting like a cannabis company or a hemp company, or know anybody that is looking for banking, definitely reach out to Dana, because First Federal is one of the really good local banks that can help you with banking solutions in this industry. So get her card or reach out to them, because they can definitely help you out. Liz, how about for you guys with tax? I'm not even going to bring up 280E, but what are some of the other, besides 280E, what are some of the other challenges that you face when dealing with your cannabis or hemp clients?
It's mostly them. Before it was always the banking issue. It was always like, oh, my bank is challenging me. I'm going to lose my bank. I lost my bank. I can't find a bank. So that was always a struggle, was helping them find the right banking solutions. It was always finding the right resources, finding them a good attorney to also help them with any sort of business sense. And the operation too. I mean, I think that having a strong internal accounting department for a lot of our clients was important. And then, which is a sense of, you know, just because of the financial side of it. You know, they have to have good, clean financials for any sort of tax compliance purposes.
Right.
And but challenge-wise, I mean, it's mostly just staying on top of every court case that's coming up, to stay on top of anything that's going on with the states, making sure that all the states our clients are being compliant in that sense. So it's a lot of education, and we're always educating our clients as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, for you, Dave, speaking of educating your clients, when you get a new client that's in the space, what kind of education do you do? Like, do you have to teach them? Obviously, there's certain insurance any operating company needs, D&O, general liability. But do you educate, or what are some of the other types of insurance that people need in your industry?
Yeah, so I do like to educate. I do like to ask a lot of questions when I am meeting a new client, or I am having a prospective client, because I want to make sure that they have the right coverages at the right time, wherever they are in the development stages of their business. I mean, they might be a dispensary, and yet they don't need property insurance at any given point in time. They're still in the development stage, and they just might need D&O and cyber liability because they're just getting the word out, and they want to be covered by both their directors and officers, and also by their cyber risk and all the marketing that they're doing, especially on whether it be social media or any other marketing channels. Yeah. So yeah, it's at what point in time you are in the development stages will trigger your insurance products needs.
Right, absolutely. Now for Zach and Doug, as lawyers, what type of obstacles do you run into, or ethical considerations when advising your clients? Because I mean, you're in-house, Doug, but for you, Zach, being at a law firm, you know, what kind of ethical things do you run into? Because everybody always wants it now, or... Yeah,
so I guess as lawyers, there's three things that we really run into. The first one being, as lawyers, we're bound by the rules of professional conduct wherever we practice. And it's really interesting because there are states where cannabis is legal, and the state bar the state government they have not actually set forth policy, or they've gone the other way. You know, a good example is South Dakota. South Dakota just legalized both medical and adult use marijuana sales, but within like 2 months, their state bar came out with an ethical opinion that says lawyers can't actually provide legal services to them. So we have to walk that very thin line of determining how far what we can go within our own rules of professional conduct as attorneys. You know, one of the other hurdles I think that we run into, at least from the law firm perspective, is, you know, as the cannabis industry started developing, you see more law firms jumping into the space. And, you know, in the last 2 years, every large law firm, and large law firms run very much like corporations, so there is a stereotype to it. And so there's very much, when we talk about educating the clients, but there's a lot of educating our own professionals that, hey, this isn't just a fly-by-night practice, this isn't illegal, we are providing legal services to, you know, otherwise state legal operations. You know, everyone needs an attorney. They're entitled to their own legal counsel. So educating our own professionals that this is actually real is worthwhile. You know, cannabis deals, cannabis transactions, cannabis litigation, it generates millions and millions and millions of dollars for multiple law firms across the country. And it literally just takes time and resource to educate old guard lawyers that, hey, this isn't just the redheaded stepchild of a law firm practice. You know, so those are two of the, I think, the biggest hurdles that we face as lawyers. And then I guess the third one being knowledgeable enough within your space. You know, in the law firm world, you know, in the legal practice, you know, there are folks that are specialists as litigators, folks that are specialists as IT or do real estate or, you know, corporate transactional work, or regulatory work for the matter. And so it's making yourself accessible within the cannabis sector to understand what is your niche, so to speak. It's okay to be a jack of all trades, but you still need to be able to understand the resources you have and what you don't have. Because the last thing you want to do is also tell a client, yeah, I can do that. No problem, I can handle that $50 million deal you've got on the table when you've never done a $50 million deal. And that opens up the last real issue of liability insurance. Most law firms, whenever they get into the cannabis sector, the first thing they do, the first phone call they make is to that guy. It's to your insurance broker. Because you want to know, under your own malpractice insurance, can I do this? So there are those hurdles on the back end that clients don't ever realize, but you've got to find that balance. And once you find the balance, it's pretty smooth sailing. So
I also see that question pop up, especially for the lawyers. I also see that question pop up for the doctors who are recommending patients. Does their medical malpractice policy cover them while they're recommending medical marijuana recommendations? Sometimes, most of the case, it's their standard medical malpractice policy. It's just a very expensive piece of paper. They really need to look with a fine-tooth comb over their policies to make sure that they are covered from cannabis risks.
That's very true.
Yes.
Do you offer any?
I do offer medical malpractice and professional errors and omissions for both doctors and lawyers.
Wonderful. Doug, it's a little different for you just because you're in-house, so you're dealing with the CEOs and the COOs, and so your client is really dealing with upper management and the head-ups of the company. What type of obstacles do you face when helping them navigate the tricky waters?
Yeah, and I'll say we have an external component too, which I'll talk about,
Okay.
but I'll start with the internal, which is right. And I think, you know, there's this desire, particularly in the ancillary space, where, as I alluded to before, the rules that apply to us aren't always clear, or they may be more risk-based rather than a direct regulatory regime. And as a result, there's this desire for clear answers, and there aren't always bright lines. I always like to tell the team, there are no highways in our business, right? There's no clear path from A to B, and so a lot of the advice you give has to really be about quantifying or calculating to the best of your judgment what risks are. I mean, there's certain things that are obviously clear in terms of compliance, and then there's other things like how I market this product. Is that going to cross the line into showing that this is a product primarily used for cannabis and therefore make it paraphernalia? It's not a bright line. It's a matter of judgment and risk tolerance, and so I think internally the biggest thing is being sure you can quantify that and being on the same page with your executives about sort of, and forceful when necessary, about when something clearly crosses a line, when something's clearly okay, and then when it's in the middle, telling them, here's the risks, but there's nothing saying you can't do it, so let's talk through it. You know, I face similar issues externally because so many of our customers are cannabis businesses. And by nature, the products we sell them end up being impacted by the regulatory regimes that they are subject to. So everyone knows there's packaging rules, and every state has slightly different packaging rules or very different packaging rules. And or in dispensaries, there are rules about what types of products can be sold in every state. Some states you can't sell hemp CBD in a dispensary. Some states you can't sell non-cannabis products in a dispensary. And so we'll get those questions all the time, and it's a very fine line because I can't be a lawyer for a dispensary. They're not my client. At the same time, as a service or goods provider to them, I want to provide value. We want to provide value. And so, you know, the way we address that is by developing resources that can be used that are appropriately hedged by not legal advice, talk to your lawyers, but here are the considerations you should take into effect when buying packaging in such and such state or vaporization hardware in such and such state. So it's a fine line to walk. And then I have the last one I'll say, and it goes back to the rules of professional responsibility and isn't really a cannabis industry specific one, but I always find that a challenge is, as a lawyer, when you're dealing with a represented party, you're supposed to only speak with their lawyer. You don't go directly to the, and I play this sort of dual lawyer business role with a lot of smaller companies that don't have an in-house lawyer, but they may have an external lawyer. And when do I have to stop talking to the business people at those companies if there's some sort of dispute or some sort of negotiation and deal with their lawyers? And it is a incredibly challenging scenario to do appropriately. You want to be effective, and in most instances the other side wants to keep talking. They don't want to have to get their expensive and risk-averse lawyer involved. They want to figure out something, but I at times have to pull myself back and say, hey, you can talk to our VP of whatever, or I can talk to your lawyer, but this conversation has to end.
Yeah, that is very tricky. I didn't even think about that component, but even any in-house counsel, that is, I'm sure you face that too at Akerman, when you're with your multinational cannabis company. But yeah, in-house counsel, there's always that fine line because you're always dealing with external, third parties, smaller business clients, and
I feel like I attend one CLE on it a year, and there's never a clear answer.
No.
That's actually an interesting point you touched on. It's the gray, right? There's no clearly defined black and white, especially whether in the ancillary side, right? I think for all of us, there is no yes, no, right? There is always a black and white, but there is a lot of gray, and to a certain extent, it's providing the client or who you're working with enough information to make an educated business decision. A lot of times what I would come back to clients and tell them is, listen, at the end of the day, you can do the X, you can do Y. Everything in the middle, well, not really sure. But here are your options. It's a business call, right? If you can put, like for you, like if you can put your C-suites in a position to understand what the risk is, what the reward is, same with any other client. Letting them understand in that gray space. And that's the hardest, or not the hardest, but that's a really hard place for, I think, any of us to really navigate, right? And understand, because there isn't black and white answers to all these. So you're constantly, like Doug said, you're constantly adapting your approach to something because that's just the nature of the industry.
Liz, do you see any of that dealing, when you're doing audits and helping people with their taxes? Do you have clients that are trying to get creative and trying to make you push the envelope? And how do you guys handle that?
We always call that creative accounting. And so we struggle with that with our clients because we want to make sure that in the case that they ever get audited by the IRS, that do we have enough to defend their positions? And it's always a difficult conversation to have. And so sometimes clients are like, well, I really want to take this position. I'm very passionate about it. And we're like, okay, well, if we agree with it and it comes back and it bites us, it's not my problem. Like, we try to educate you. We try to go against it. And then, it's just, we always have that balance of, we could always lose. It's a lose-lose situation. Our clients could be angry with us if we don't take the position, or if the clients are, and if something happens, then their clients are angry at us.
Right, are they angry now, or are they going to be angry?
So they're always angry at me. So it's like, okay, how am I ever going to win? But so at this situation, it's just, I'd rather be more conservative, especially when it comes down to making sure that we're really taking and educating ourselves in any position that we take, and making sure that we're communicating with our clients and having the open conversations and making sure we're talking to their attorneys. Because in that situation, anything that they do, any decisions that they make today could affect them, not today, but may affect them in a year or 2 years or 3 years or 5 years. It could always affect them. So it's just making sure that there's always those conversations. And they're difficult to have. They're always
very
difficult to have.
Absolutely.
With any industry, not just cannabis, but any industry.
Absolutely.
I think also it's important, you just kind of touched on something. When you're providing a service or a good or anything ancillary nature to any operator, at least from my perspective, know what you know and know what you don't know. Yeah. And the stuff you don't know, don't be afraid to say it and find the people. There are plenty of client matters that I have where I'm not a tax lawyer, I'm not an accountant, but the client's going to bring a deal to me. I know enough to know, hey, there may be a tax issue here. I know you want this done quick and cheap, but it's going to cost you a couple extra $1,000 because we're going to have to talk to your accountants, right? Or I'm going to have to bring in my tax attorney to look at it. Know the extent of what you want. When you start doing more than you can, you tend to get yourself in trouble, right? That's one of the few black and white lines I know is, when I don't know something, yeah, if I want, I'll learn about it and I'll make myself knowledgeable about it. But I'm not going to put my clients at risk for something kind of, sort of, okay. No, I'm going to call their accountants. I'm going to get on the phone with their bank. I'm going to get on the phone with, I can't tell you how many times I talk to clients' insurance brokers because we need to assess their policies for a transaction. So know what you know and know what you don't know.
I mean, I can speak off of that too. I don't sell life insurance. I don't sell keyman insurance. I don't do employee benefits. I don't do any of the personal lines on the insurance side for the cannabis industry. I have somebody who does, but I don't deal with that because that's an entirely different side of the coin for me. I only want to deal with what I know and how I can help my customer the best.
Yeah, that's a great takeaway just for this whole panel. We are going to wrap up, try to get us back on time. But before we wrap, do you guys have any other advice for people either trying to or thinking about servicing cannabis clients? Do you have any last parting words of advice?
Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid to take the risk. All of us at some point, we're working in industries that are traditional blue chip industries, insurance, banking, accounting, legal. But at some point, we all basically said, there's the potential for this industry to emerge as X, as the next great thing. Wherever you are in your life or your career, don't be afraid to take the chance. That's my approach to it. If anything, and also just be mindful of the fact of, I get back to the analogy you brought at the beginning, and I used to tell this to people all the time. If we all pull out our phones, almost everyone in here is either a Samsung or an iPhone, right? There's only one Apple, there's only one Samsung. But there are thousands and thousands of companies that make the plugs, the chipsets, the cases, the covers, the apps, you name it, right? Those are people that provide services. Those are ancillary businesses. It's the same for the cannabis industry. You don't need to be growing it and manufacturing it and selling it to be in the cannabis industry and be successful in the cannabis industry. So I think that's something to be really mindful of. That's my own parting words.
I really see this in the ideal situation for any sort of, cannabis company. This is essentially your starting five: accounting, banking, in-house counsel, outside counsel, and insurance. We are a team to help you grow faster in this industry and grow compliant in this industry and grow financially sound in this industry.
Definitely. And not to give a plug, to Cannabis Lab, but Cannabis Lab has connected all of us. So now I can call Dave. I didn't know Dave before Cannabis Lab. Now I can call Dave and send him my cannabis or hemp clients. So being able to foster the relationship among ancillary service providers to help boost your own business is essential. We all can refer clients to one another. I send people to Dana, I send people to Liz. So it's great to have a network that we can all foster and support the cannabis and hemp industries together. How about anybody else? Any final last words or?
Don't wait till the last minute to open up a checking account because the process literally takes a minimum of 3 to 5 weeks.
Okay.
So
that's good advice.
It's an arduous process for a reason.
Yeah. I would just say have a really strong infrastructure. Like make sure you have really good support and resources to go to. Like you said, like you may not know everything. Like I'm not an auditor, but I know enough to be dangerous, but I'm not an auditor, so I have to rely on my auditors to help me. I'm not an attorney, so I have to rely on my attorneys to help me too with any sort of legal terminologies or contracts. So, and I do tax work, so I stick with what I know, and but always have a really strong foundation and support and resources. So.
How about you, Doug? Any
I guess what I'll
words?
say is, in industries, there can, at times in certain industries, be a tendency to think of the type of services we're talking about up here as sort of like necessary evils, right? Things you have to do, but that no one's excited about. In a highly regulated industry like this, it's much more than that. You really, to be successful, need to view it as part of your foundation. And if you do it well, even potentially as a competitive advantage. So, embrace it, because it's going to be part of your business no matter what. It'll only cause you more pain down the road if you kind of give it the short shrift to begin with.
It's expensive, but it's worth it, right?
Yes, absolutely.
Which is a pitch for everyone else. Right?
Well, I just want to thank you all for being here. These guys are some of the most knowledgeable in the industry for what they do. So if they are able to stick around, feel free to pick their brains. Reach out to us afterwards if you need contact information. But thank you guys. You guys are true warriors in the field and very knowledgeable. And we appreciate you sharing some of your wisdom with us.
Thank you so much.
Oh, my mask.